So we are a group a nonpartisan group that works to develop and advocate for policies to revive community news. And the Rebuild Local News Coalition is a national coalition, very broad, of publisher groups, labor unions, journalism groups, funders, journalism support organizations, who have all, though disagreeing occasionally, as I learned the first time I got the labor unions and the publishers in the same room, they do agree on the importance of local news and making progress in this area. And as a general caveat, no one in that coalition thinks that public policy or government support is the only or even the main way to help revive local news. No one. So it is actually the work that you all are doing in the field with new business models and new ways of covering communities that is essential. But we all came to the conclusion that because of the severity of the crisis, 75% drop of the number of journalists, thousands of communities without news, that public support, public policy needs to be a piece of the puzzle. $74 million is the amount that we estimate is going to go to local newsrooms just this year in 2026 as a result of laws that were passed in just 6 states. So it's working. You know, the amount of support that can be generated with even relatively modest government programs is at a very high scale. You can imagine if that is with 6 states, what we could do if we make this a fully national movement. And it is growing. It is growing, and you know, when we started this, it was a couple states, and now there's probably about 20 states that are looking at doing something seriously. You know, I think part of why this momentum has happened is that Press Forward made public policy one of its 4 pillars, and so the idea that public policy is part of what needs to happen has really been spreading. And normally at this point, I would kind of take you on a tour of the different states that are doing interesting things, but I'm going to focus on one state that really is taking the lead, and that luckily is Illinois. To fact check, I have to fact check Governor Pritzker when he said Illinois is the leader in this. Fact check, true. So a few years ago, Senator Steve Stottlemyre, who is probably the most effective leading state legislator in the country in advocating for local news, pushed for a task force that brought a wide range of different people together to talk about this, took testimony, and came up with a bunch of recommendations, which he then packaged into legislation. Rebuild and other groups worked together. We remember working with La Raza and the labor unions, and the Illinois Press Association has been really critical, Medill, and got this law passed. And it's called an employment tax credit, but it's kind of a confusing phrase because people think, oh, that means I get a little off my taxes. It's a grant. It's a grant program using the tax system as the delivery mechanism. And you basically get about $15,000 for an existing reporter and an additional $10,000 for new hires. And there's various rules. It's capped at $150,000 per newsroom. There's also a cap on how much any given chain that has multiple newsrooms can get. And it's $4 million in total for the current employee pool and $1 million for the new. And there was a lot of attention and time spent on the kind of fine print there of like, how do you devise something, eligibility requirements that are fair and objective and First Amendment friendly. It's really important to get that right, and I think this law did. This data is from Medill, which has been an amazing key part of this whole process that you saw some of this already, but 130 outlets have already benefited from this around the state. And this stat that Governor Pritzker mentioned, that 2/3 of the recipients were from smaller newsrooms, 6 employees or fewer, I think is really significant because there was some fear, you know, of like, well, is a tax program like this going to just end up kind of going to the big players and they'd use it all up and it wouldn't get out to smaller players or nonprofits? And the opposite has been true. Like the disproportionate beneficiaries have been smaller players, players outside of Chicago, and 1/3 are nonprofits. So, and so far, all the guardrails have held also. So the various rules that we put in there to make sure this was going to actual community journalism seem to be working. And this is just a very partial list of recipients in Illinois. And you can see it's like a very wide range. It's public radio stations, rural newspapers, nonprofits, digital only. I'd note, Chicago Public Media is there as one of the bigger recipients, and that's really interesting because as we have the conversation about how does public media get reinvented and reinvigorated, things like this that are a little bit non-traditional when we think about public support for public media may be an important part of the solution. So it's a little early to know exactly how this is playing out on the ground with coverage, but the early returns are very good. One recipient said, it's going to have a sizable impact on our ability to cover the community. Another said, we're going to use this for fundraising. We're going to actually treat this as a match. Like, hey, if you support a new hire in our thing, the state is going to match it. It's really very cool development. And another publisher said it's going to allow us to save jobs. And we've heard that from multiple places. Now, there is room for improvement. This is the first year. One of the things I've loved about working with Senator Stottleman is he keeps saying, how can we improve it? Which I'm not sure is a sentence that often comes out of state legislator mouths. But we are actually very committed to learning from the first few years and making whatever adjustments are necessary. And there's a couple little things that it turned out that public radio stations that had licenses with universities were not eligible in the way it was written as opposed to if you were a C3. So there's things like that that need to get worked out. And the new hire pool was undersubscribed. So we got to figure out, we'll see in the next round whether that's still true. If that's still the case, we need to kind of think about why that might be. So far, 26 is off to a faster start than 25. So it's possible that the program is going to be oversubscribed. And of course, there's a simple solution to that, which is grow the program. And of course, my general view is Illinois has something here that's really working well. And not that we shouldn't add to it with new programs, but it's a rare and beautiful thing that you have this working so well. Let's perfect it and grow it. Now, there are some other ideas that all those other states are doing that y'all could consider as well. There's no law that says you can only have one idea to try to help local news. Government advertising, directing more of it to community news. New York City sort of pioneered this, and they have found that as a result of a law that said half of their government advertising had to go to local media, a shift of $72 million in 5 years happened without the government spending an additional penny. So this was money that was going either to national media or tech platforms that got pushed to community newspapers and community news outlets. And that's really transformative. Chicago has taken steps in this direction, and Public Narrative is working on getting that done. So hopefully Chicago will be the next major city that does that. New Jersey and Maryland are in a little bit of a competition to become the first state to do it on a state level. We're hoping that happens in the next few months. That's one of our big priorities in the next few months. And then other states have done a kind of step in that direction, which is, Illinois did this, Minnesota did this, which is transparency. Basically, at a minimum, the government should say how it's spending the money. Where are these ads going? And it could be that, what we're seeing in other states is that when people see that, oh my, a lot of this is going to, Google and Facebook or tech platforms or national, that people will say, like, gosh, this is Illinois taxpayer money. Maybe it should be spent in Illinois and spent toward, Illinois media. Fellowships. This is kind of like the Report for America model where I used to work, but it's financed by state governments instead of just privately. So California, New Mexico, and Washington State all have programs that are basically placing reporters into newsrooms for 1 or 2 years, paid for by the state, Washington's actually teaming up now with Report for America, kind of a public-private version, where they're going to place a reporter in every county in Washington state. 17 reporters, every county in Washington state, combination of government funding and private funding. This is the idea that has gotten the most interest in sort of purple and red states. And it is a very interesting and exciting idea, I think. It's tax relief for small businesses that advertise in local news. So the tax credit actually goes to restaurants and hardware stores and other small businesses that if they advertise in local news. And so the choice is up to the small business, not to the government of where they subsidize. So it's a very market-oriented thing. And in addition to just providing revenue, I love the fact that it re-energizes that symbiotic relationship between Main Street business and Main Street media, which has been so important in the past and really needs to be revived. So just to end, we obviously are big advocates for the role of public policy, but we also approach it with some humility, which is to say, if you do this badly, you can make things worse. You don't want to have the government just be giving out checks to newsrooms, that they like or dislike. You have to create these programs in ways that are protecting the First Amendment, protecting editorial independence. And the good news is that it can be done. It really can be done. We've seen 4 or 5 different models. We also are very focused on making sure it's platform agnostic, whether it's print, digital, broadcast, that it is very grounded in the community, the diversity of communities, and local ownership whenever possible. And then the last thing I would say is that it also be future friendly, meaning we don't want public policy to just enshrine the legacy players. The legacy players are incredibly important, but we also want public policy that is going to feed in and uplift the new players, even ones we don't know about what they are yet. That tomorrow may come and there's a new model. So these policies, I think, do that as well. So it's an exciting time. I think we've proven this model, and Illinois has really been the leading state. New Mexico might argue with you, but I'll go with Illinois, at least while I'm here. And I do think that the opportunity is here to even grow it further and lead the nation. Thank you.